If $100,000 changed how the world treats you, 250,000 changes something deeper. It changes what's actually possible. The first 100 grand was about becoming real, proving you could do it. But somewhere around $250,000, a second thing quietly switches on. Your money stops being a thing you protect and starts becoming a thing that works. A machine that earns. This is the milestone almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one of your whole financial life. Let me show you exactly what it unlocks. Here's the strange part about $250,000. It doesn't feel like a finish line. There's no party. Nothing in your daily life looks different the morning after you cross it. You still go to work. You still check the same app. But underneath the surface, the rules have changed. At 100,000, you had a buffer. At $250,000, you have an engine. And an engine doesn't just protect you. It pulls you forward, faster and faster, whether you're paying attention or not. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the 7 things that quietly unlock at $250,000. The powers that 100,000 only hinted at, but $250,000 actually delivers. Most people will never feel these because most people never get here. You're about to understand why the ones who do seem to pull away so fast. So why 250,000? Why does this number matter when nobody ever puts it on a vision board? Because 100,000 and $250,000 are 2 completely different kinds of milestones. The first one is a milestone of proof. It says, I can save. I can stick with something. I have the habit. It's emotional. It's about who you've become. But the second milestone isn't about proof anymore. It's about power. It's the point where the size of your money becomes large enough to start doing real work on its own. Think about it like this. At 100,000, compounding is real, but it's polite. A normal market year might add several $1,000s in the background. Nice, but it doesn't change your life. At 250,000, that same quiet percentage isn't a few thousand anymore. On average, long-term returns, $250,000 can throw off something in the range of a small second salary every single year, without you adding a cent. That's the line we're really talking about. It's the point where your money's contribution starts to rival your own. And here's what makes it sneak up on people. The journey from 100,000 to 250,000 is not 2.5 times as hard as the first 100. In a lot of cases, it's actually easier, because now you've got 2 engines pushing instead of 1. You're still saving, yes, but the market is now saving alongside you in amounts that finally matter. The first 100,000 you carried almost entirely on your back. The road to $250,000, you've got a partner. That's why this milestone deserves its own video. Not because the world throws you a parade at 250 grand. It doesn't. But because this is the exact stretch of the journey where your financial life stops being about discipline and starts being about leverage. Where the question changes from, can I save money, to, what can my money now do? So let's break down the 7 things that quietly switch on. The first one is the one everything else is built on. Unlock number 1. A second income quietly arrives, and you didn't have to apply for it. This is the big one, the one the whole milestone is built around. At $250,000, your money starts earning something close to what a part-time job pays, every year automatically, while you do absolutely nothing. Run the rough numbers. A diversified portfolio, over the long run, has historically returned somewhere in the high single digits on average. Even if you're conservative and call it 7%, 7% of $250,000 is around $17,500 a year. In stronger years, it's well over 20. That is a real second income, quietly landing in your accounts. No commute, no boss, no clock. Now compare that to where you started. At $10,000 saved, that same 7% is $700 a year, about $2 a day, invisible. At $100,000, it's $7,000 a year. Finally noticeable, but not life-changing. At $250,000, it crosses into territory that can genuinely move the needle. It can cover a car payment. It can cover groceries for a family. For some people, it quietly covers the rent. The same force was always there. It just needed a big enough base to stand on. And this is the moment the whole game flips. Up until now, every dollar of growth came from your effort. You earned it, you saved it, you added it by hand. But at $250,000, a growing share of your progress is coming from the money itself. You've hired an employee who never sleeps, never complains, never asks for a raise, and works every hour of every day, including the ones you spend on vacation. The richer that employee gets, the more it earns, and the more it earns, the richer it gets. That's the first unlock, and everything else flows from it. Your money got a job. Unlock number 2, and this one is a mind game most people get completely backwards. At $250,000, you are not a quarter of the way to $1 million. You are secretly more than halfway there. That sounds impossible. $250,000 is literally 25% of $1 million. So how can it be past the halfway point? Because money doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows in a curve. And the curve does most of its work near the end. Let me show you what that actually means. Imagine you stop adding money entirely and just let $250,000 compound at a steady average rate. The jump from $250,000 to $500,000 might take roughly a decade, but the jump from $500,000 to $1 million takes the same decade because it's the same doubling. Each doubling is the same percentage, but a far bigger dollar leap. Here's the part that should change how you feel about your progress. The hardest, slowest, most painful stretch of the entire millionaire journey is the part you've already done. Getting from 0 to $250,000 is the grind. It's the years of no visible momentum, the part where it's all you and almost none of the math. But once you're standing at $250,000, the engine is finally big enough that the rest of the climb tilts in your favor. You've crossed the hump. The boulder you were pushing uphill is now sitting at the top of the slope. This is why the people who reach $250,000 so often go on to reach much more. And why it can look like luck or magic from the outside. It isn't. They simply got past the flat part of the curve where everyone else gives up and let the steep part do what it always does. So if you're sitting at this milestone feeling like you've barely started, flip it. You haven't barely started. You've done the worst part. From here, the math is finally on your team and it's about to get loud. Unlock number 3. You quietly enter what people in the money world call coast mode. And it's one of the most freeing feelings money can buy. Here's the idea. Coast mode is the point where you've saved enough, early enough, that even if you never invested another single dollar, the money you already have would grow into a comfortable retirement on its own, just from time and compounding. You're not done. You still have to cover today's bills. But the future? The future is quietly handled. The retirement version of you is already funded by the present version of you. All that's left is to coast. At $250,000, depending on your age, you're often standing right at the doorway of this. Picture $250,000 left untouched for 30 years at a normal average return. It doesn't just grow a little. It can balloon into well over $1 million, sometimes approaching $2 million, without you adding a cent. That means the saving you've already done may have bought your retirement, and everything you earn from here can go toward living instead of just storing up for later. Feel what that does to the pressure. Up to this point, every financial decision carried a quiet panic underneath it. Am I saving enough? Will I be okay when I'm old? Am I behind? Coast mode turns the volume down on that fear. You can breathe. You can choose a job you like over a job that pays slightly more. You can take your foot off the gas without the whole thing falling apart. You stop sprinting away from poverty and start walking toward a life. Most people white-knuckle that fear about the future their entire lives. $250,000, invested early enough, is often the moment it finally loosens its grip. That's unlock number 3. The future stops being a threat and becomes a thing you've already paid for. Unlock number 4. Your leverage levels up from a pause to a runway. Remember what $100,000 bought you. The power to say, let me think about it. The power to pause, to walk away from a bad deal because a setback wouldn't kill you. That was real, and it was valuable. But $250,000 takes that power and stretches it across time. It doesn't just buy you a pause, it buys you a runway. A runway is months, sometimes years, where you can live without a paycheck and be completely fine. Think about what $250,000 actually represents in spending terms. For many households, that's 2, 3, even 4 full years of expenses sitting in reserve. And years of breathing room change what you're capable of in a way that a few months never could. A pause lets you decline a bad job. A runway lets you build something better instead. This is where money quietly turns into options that can reshape your entire life. With a runway, you can leave the career that's slowly draining you and actually take the time to find the right next thing instead of panic-grabbing the first offer. You can start the business and give it the 18 months it genuinely needs to work instead of killing it at month 3 because rent is due. You can go back to school, move across the country, take the lower-paying job that leads somewhere, care for a family member, or simply step back and figure out what you actually want, without the floor falling out from under you. That's the difference between a buffer and a runway. A buffer protects the life you already have. A runway lets you go build a different one. And almost nobody talks about how rare that is. Most people will never, in their entire lives, have 2 or 3 years of freedom sitting in an account, quietly waiting to be spent on a bet on themselves. At $250,000 you might. That's unlock number 4, and it's the one that can change not just your finances, but the entire direction of your story. Unlock number 5, and this one is subtle, but it separates the people who keep climbing from the people who quietly slide back. At $250,000, what you buy starts to change. For most of your life, money goes out the door toward things that lose value the second you own them. The newer car, the bigger TV, the upgrade you didn't really need. That's normal. It's how almost everyone spends because spending is how we're taught to feel successful. But somewhere around this milestone, a quiet shift happens in the people who keep growing. They stop buying things that go down in value and start buying things that go up. This is the move from buying liabilities to buying assets. A liability takes money out of your pocket every month. The finance truck, the gadget, the stuff. An asset puts money in. A share of a business, an index fund, a rental, a skill that raises your income, even a slow, boring dividend payer. At $250,000, you finally have enough surplus that you can direct real money toward the second category. And every asset you buy is another small employee added to the team from unlock number 1. But here's the deeper version of this shift, and it's the one that matters most. The most valuable thing you can start buying at this level isn't a stock, it's time. You can pay someone to do the work you hate so you can spend your hours on the work that actually grows you. You can buy convenience that gives you back your evenings. You can buy your way out of the small daily frictions that used to eat your energy. The wealthy figured out long ago that the real luxury was never the object. It was the freedom to spend your one non-renewable resource, your time, on what you choose. $250,000 is often where you can first afford to start buying it back. That's unlock number 5. You stop buying stuff and start buying assets and hours. Unlock number 6. You quietly cross over to the other side of the table. You become the bank. Think back to where this all started. When you had nothing, you were the one borrowing. You paid the interest. You paid the fees. The financial system made money off of you. At $100,000, the system started competing for you instead of preying on you. But at $250,000, something further happens. You stop being the customer of capital and start being a source of it. You become the one who lends, the one who invests, the one whose money other people now want to use. Here's what that looks like in real life. Your money sits in funds that lend to businesses and governments, and you collect the interest that someone like your younger self used to pay. You can invest in other people's companies and own a slice of their growth. You become the person in the family or the friend group who can actually float a serious loan, fund an opportunity, or back someone's idea, and on your terms, not out of desperation. You've moved from the side of the table that pays to the side that gets paid. And this is one of the quietest, most permanent shifts of the whole journey, because it compounds socially as well as financially. Capital flows toward people who have capital. Opportunities, the real ones, the private ones, the ones that never get advertised, go to the people who can actually act on them. When you have $250,000, you start getting access to rooms and deals that simply don't exist for people without it. Not because anyone's being unfair, but because money, by its nature, looks for more money. You've finally become someone it's looking for. That's unlock number 6. You're not the borrower anymore. You're the bank. Unlock number 7, and it's the one that ties every other one together. Your identity quietly changes from a saver into an allocator. For the entire first leg of this journey, your job was simple and brutal. Save. Spend less than you earn, protect the gap, repeat. Saving is a discipline, and it's mostly about saying no. But at $250,000, the most important question in your financial life stops being, how do I save more, and becomes, where should all this money go? That's a completely different skill. That's not a saver's question. That's an allocator's question. An allocator doesn't just hoard money, they direct it. They think about where each dollar will do the most work. Should it buy assets, or buy time, or fund a runway, or back a bet on themselves? They stop seeing their money as a single pile to guard and start seeing it as a team of workers to deploy. And that mental shift is worth more than the $250,000 itself, because it's the exact way every wealthy person you've ever heard of actually thinks. They are not better savers than you. They are better allocators. And here's the beautiful part of this final unlock. Once you start thinking like an allocator, you can never really go back. You begin to see opportunities everywhere, not as things you can't afford, but as things you could choose to fund. You see your income not as money to spend, but as fuel to direct. The $250,000 didn't just give you a second income or a runway or a coast-funded retirement. It upgraded the operating system in your head. You stopped being a person who is careful with money and became a person who commands it. That's the 7th unlock, and it's the one that makes all the others permanent. So if you're standing at 100,000 or somewhere on the way, how do you actually cross into a $250,000 and switch all of this on? Here's the good news, and it's genuinely good. You do not need a new plan. The exact habits that got you the first 100,000 are the same ones that get you here, except now they're easier because the math is finally helping. The temptation at this stage is to think you need something clever, a hot stock, a side hustle empire, a complicated scheme. You don't. You need to keep doing the boring thing while the engine grows underneath you. So, 4 quiet rules for this stretch. First, do not inflate your life. This is the trap that eats most people right here. The income went up, the savings grew, and the instinct is to upgrade everything to match. Resist it. Every lifestyle upgrade you skip is fuel poured straight into the engine. Second, keep protecting the gap and automate it exactly like before. Move the money the day it lands, before your lifestyle can absorb it. Third, when your income rises, send most of the raise to the engine instead of to your spending. Raises are rocket fuel, but only if they don't quietly disappear into a nicer life. And fourth, the hardest one, stay invested through the scary parts. The road from 100,000 to $250,000 will almost certainly include at least one ugly stretch where the market drops and your balance falls and every instinct screams at you to pull out. Don't. The people who reach this milestone aren't the ones who timed it perfectly. They're the ones who simply refused to interrupt the compounding. That's it. Don't inflate, protect the gap, feed it your raises, and never break the chain. It's not exciting. But the $250,000 isn't built on excitement. It's built on a person who decided quietly to let the engine run. 100,000 proved you could do it. 250,000 is where your money finally starts doing it with you. The second income, the halfway to a million curve, coast mode, the runway, the assets, becoming the bank, and the allocator's mind that ties it all together. If this gave you a new way to see the number you're working toward, you'll feel right at home in the community we're building. Drop a comment with the milestone you're chasing next, and we'll keep breaking down exactly how the quietly wealthy actually think. And one honest note every time. This channel is for education, not financial advice. I'm not your advisor. Learn it, question it, run your own numbers, and make the call that's right for you. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll talk about what changes when you cross the next big line. $500,000.